Our three panelists are really important because they are also our headline sponsors. So thank you, first of all, for that. We couldn't do these kind of events without our sponsors, so it's really appreciated. And we wanted to take a slightly different angle to let me just move the slide on. To the panel, and hear from three innovators and three businesses in the cold storage sector providing services and products to operators, and get their perspective on how attitudes are changing towards sustainability, how their products are changing, but also how within your own businesses you're changing your approach to be more sustainable. We'll let you introduce yourself first. We'll start with Will.
Thank you. A fascinating discussion, touching on many of the points we discuss as an organisation. So I am the commercial director, Will Watson of Zestec, my left. We are an organisation with significant heritage in the solar rooftop market. We're owned by Octopus Energy, just to give it some relevance. So some of you potentially will have your retail electricity contracts with Octopus. But interestingly, Octopus are deeply invested in a wide variety of renewable capability, not just in this country, but also across Europe. So solar, wind, biomass, anaerobic digestion. And they have around about 6 billion euros of invested funds across those asset classes. So whilst you may recognize them as a retail organization, they are investing daily in this type of capability. Bringing it back to Zestec and our role in the marketplace, we've been working with industrial and commercial organizations for over 10 years, ostensibly installing rooftop solar and running from modeling, looking at the potential investment, but ultimately saving organizations significant sums of money by installing. And really, it touches on so many points that were raised in the previous session. And, we see the market growing exponentially. And I know it's relevant to all of you here today. So thank you for listening.
Thanks,
Thank
Will.
you for having me.
And Joanne?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Moore, the Group Sustainability Manager for the P&M Group. We're a group of small specialist subcontractors to the cold chain industry. Most of you might have heard of ISD Solutions. We build cold stores of all shapes and sizes under that brand. And we're also here today with PLG Insulations, who provide thermal insulation engineering to pipework. And we see that there's a lot more efficiency that could be got out of the envelope of a cold store, as well as the pipework being properly insulated. So we're sort of here in that capacity to talk to you about that today and hopefully help you achieve your energy efficiency goals.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joanne. And last but not least, Lisa.
Got to follow those, haven't I?
They were long introductions.
Absolutely. So I'll try and keep it brief. I'm Lisa Robotham. I work for Blue Q Portable Cold Stores. We specialise in the hire and supply of the first hybrid blast freezer into market. We're here to talk about the industrial cold stores and blast freezers.
Brilliant, thank you. So a really varied panel, I think, all providing slightly different services and products into the cold storage market. Should say, if anybody has any questions at any point, Shane's hanging around somewhere with the microphone, so please feel free to put your hand up. I don't quite know how we'll get the microphone to people, but we'll try. But I wanted to start off just by focusing, before we get to your specific products, is how your customers are changing, and how all the things that Alan has just been through around the need to be more sustainable, the companies wanting to be more visibly sustainable, how that's impacting how they're coming to you and asking for guidance with your products.
No, absolutely, 100%. So historically, there was a concentration, especially within the industry that I work on, it was all about the rental costs. The hidden costs and CO2 emissions didn't play part in the solution selling to the businesses, but today it very much is. So we had to come up with a concept that offered a reduction in energy whilst offering a reduction in CO2 emissions as well.
When did you start seeing that kind of change happening?
Realistically, about 5 years ago, where there was a sudden shift I've been working with Blue Cube for 13 years, and it was hard to get people to understand that the hidden cost, like energy, was a major factor. But people's social responsibility today that they have to contribute towards reducing emissions is allowing us to demonstrate our offering, how we can help their business. So we listen, we get an understanding of each application, and we set up the unit rather than just providing a box with a fridge on the back. We set up the unit around their specific application to minimise the power draw.
Brilliant. And Joanne, similar question to you, really. I mean, cost is always, one of the key considerations of operators. How difficult is it to balance those growing requirements, assuming that you've seen the same sort of pattern as Lisa? The growing need for sustainability, but still with that overriding cost problem. Do those butt up against each other?
Yeah, I was just thinking actually that I agree with quite a lot of what you've said in that it is a bit of a balance between the two, but also you want to look at the specific application and give the attention to detail in the design of what it is that we're building, whether it's your portable solutions or our permanent cold stores that we do. The getting the design right is really key. I think in terms of us in the sort of carbon emissions reduction, it's definitely come up more in the last probably 2 to 3 years. But it's also something that when we focus on making a cold store airtight or very thermal efficient, that brings financial savings as well as the carbon savings. So having an airtight cold store has been a requirement for quite some time, and that brings the benefit of carbon reduction anyway. But I think now we're just trying to get the message out there that actually whilst there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, there's some not so low-hanging fruit that can still make some really big differences. So that's what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. And are people looking more, in your experience, at the kind of lifetime costs as opposed to the upfront costs, understanding a bit more the full business case through the life cycle of the investment as opposed to just
the total cost of ownership rather than just the upfront cost? Absolutely.
That's it. Sometimes it is a challenge, I think, to get that long-term view, but when you start talking about it, some of you will have experienced this, I imagine, it really does start to make sense as soon as you start talking about it.
And I guess it's slightly different for you, Will, because you're offering a renewable solution. So you haven't had that transition, I guess, to make those products more sustainable. But presumably you've noticed a big change in demand for...
Yeah, well, we talked about a change in attitude from organisations who, thinking about the response to this question, the word sort of geopolitical kept coming up. I'm preaching to the converted when I talk about, the impacts of the last 3 or 4 years from a COVID standpoint, the war in Ukraine, the supply crunch, the price hike. Interestingly, cost is clearly the most important driver, and examples where organisations have been slightly passive around, looking for another word that I picked on from the first presentation was mitigation. They were aware that they needed to mitigate, but actually was anything forcing them to engage with us more meaningfully. And what we've seen is a significant shift in, businesses' attitude and the need and the need at a board level to demonstrate to stakeholders, internal or external or shareholders, that actually action is being taken. And that's the difference we've seen in the last 6, 12 months is, actually the demand is people are coming to us and saying, look, we have a significant issue here, and this is clearly a great way of providing mitigation. So, huge inflection point since those world events, dare I say.
Yeah, and presumably, we can't really do a cold storage panel without talking about energy prices. Presumably that's been a significant driver across that same period.
I felt like I was, gilding the lily if I spoke about, cost, but fundamentally, the price increase has been, hugely significant. And talking to customers of ours where we have delivered and are delivering these solutions, they've had a really tense time, trying to find answers to this issue. And of course, a lot of organisations hadn't hedged in any form. So they were going back to their boards and seeking, new capital just to remain afloat. And I think for us, that's been a really key moment, I think, for all businesses, not just in the cold chain, across the piece.
Yeah, I think it took a lot of people by surprise, the extent of the energy crisis, and
Yeah.
obviously energy efficiency
Yeah.
and all the measures we're talking about
Exactly.
are the key way that businesses, if you can get them installed and implemented quick enough, have helped businesses throughout that process.
Yeah.
I think we might have a question, excitingly.
Wow.
Hi, how you doing? It's Chris from SMI. You're talking about saving customers, obviously with the decarbonisation, but also other ways on blast freezers and things like that. How exactly are you doing that? How can you save customers with the energy and, for example, a blast freezer and things like that?
So it was a question that we're going to come on to.
Yeah,
but
I can it's almost like you've read my script.
I was going to say
I saw a copy.
Yeah, I left it lying around, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. If we move on to sort of technology and exactly how the products that you're providing to operators are changing to be more sustainable.
Absolutely. So no one could foresee what was going to happen with energy. But fortunately, innovations allowed us to introduce software into our models. So we have complete capacity control. So we can reduce the power draw and make the units, as I said, fit around each customer's application. So the control is on it's inverter driven. The controls on the compressors, the fans, and the valves to help minimise the power, especially through peak hours and the summer, to be able to make the units more efficient. Including with that, it was the introduction of the hybrid airflow, which allows an even distribution of air to all pallets. So we've seen and proven a 33% reduction in a blast freezing program through this technology.
Brilliant. I think, Will, lots of the work we've done previously on the future cold storage, there's a lot of gains to be made in energy efficiency, but effectively, cold storage will always need an element of energy, and that's where things like renewables are so important. How do you see the development, what's the potential within cold storage when it comes to solar, and how do you see the solar panels, I guess, evolving as a product? Will they become more efficient? Will they be able to absorb more energy over time?
I think naturally the technology lends itself to improved efficiency, and there's any number of academic organisations, organisations of many different types looking at efficiencies and how to make the panels operate more effectively. I think we're seeing a lot more questions around energy storage, so effectively incorporating solar onto a roof, but allowing organisations to store and release, and that talks to the mechanisms they have in place for cost management. I think we're seeing a lot more close monitoring of the panels themselves, so that actually the asset itself operates more efficiently, which is good for us, it's good for the organisation. And I think the other thing that we're looking at more deeply is the way in which we finance these systems. I think people are looking at all sorts of different ways to think not just about the bog standard offering, but looking at different ways of deploying monies to increase the size of the arrays, and dare I say it, push the arrays out into the curtilage of an organisation's footprint. So, ground mount solar is becoming more of a play in our world. So, yeah, it's developing all the while.
We'll come to Joanne in a moment, but I think we've got another question from the audience.
Hello. Yeah, it's Paul Holman from down at Mansfields down in Canterbury. I have a couple of points. One was regarding the energy. We've seen our energy, to give an example, from 2010, running approximately 70 stores, go from £50,000 a year to last month, it was just over £500,000 a month. In January, it was just over 500,000. So we're really up against it. Our energy costs have gone up fourfold. So it went from a base price of 15 up to pence a unit, up to nearly 40 pence a unit. I manage the stores and have done there for the last 14 years, but I have difficulties with the emissions and the CO2s, as in the energy is more efficient than the HFCs, or we're trying to reduce the energy costs. So Tom's seen it, we're at a position that we're going to build another block of 15 stores, and it's but choosing the right refrigeration, as in should it be glycol, should it be ammonia, should it be CO2, or should it be gas? I think there's a lot of scaremongering amongst using gas as well, from what I experience, in that if you've got gas and you've got a good maintenance, you're not releasing that. I think there's this big argument about some of the gases we have that have got, you know, high GWPs, and the gas companies are working down. You know, and we're looking at gases where we've gone from, say, 1,500 GWP down to like 300. I've been in contact with Honeywell out in Belgium and America, and they've got one that's 150. It will mean bigger displacements of the compressors, but that doesn't mean bigger energy use. It's more efficient in that. So I'll ask you ladies later on to sort of like give me a bit of a hand on that. And then the other one, I totally get it with the solar panels. But over the last 3 or 4 years, we're experiencing higher temperatures, ambient temperatures. We saw in Canterbury last August where we was having temperatures in the yard 42, 43 degrees. And what we was finding that it's about 1.5 megawatts of solar panels on the farm. We're finding that the solar panels are shutting down. Solar panels, and it's not a knock, are only good between the months of, say, March and September. You'll see it rise and flow, and at your peak point is at midday. I think wind turbines are a way to go. We're looking at wind times on the top of the roofs and backed up with solar panels. The other thought I had is, what about wind turbines on lorries? If you had sort of like a roofoid on the lorry that was channeling a turbine in there and generating power to that. I haven't seen anything like that at all.
Thanks, Paul. Lots of really interesting
Some refrigeration
points there.
engineers are twitching around the room on the back of that question.
I was going to say maybe you should be sitting up here.
They'll corner you in the break, Paul, on that question, I think.
It is an interesting theory, and one that we're looking at, where solar panels and wind turbine complement each other, as well as battery storage as well, so we can store it, and then a possibility of feeding back to the grid. So I agree with your theory, but we can talk again in more detail.
I don't know if there's anything to say, Lisa, about Paul made some points on refrigerants. I think obviously your blast freezing units, that's obviously an element that you're looking at as well as the energy use.
Absolutely we are. So it's a balance point for us when we have to have a unit and a gas that it's one-stop fits all applications. Yeah. So to be able to identify a gas that can go to plus 35 to minus 39, obviously it needs to be commercially viable, non-flammable and all of that. But we are doing a number of trials at the moment on A2L to further reduce, and obviously looking at other technologies for the future as well. So, but it's a bit, when we build something, we build it for 10 years. So as I said, that application needs to be able to address all different applications, if that makes sense. So it's a very fine balance on what we can and what we can't do.
And that's a big part of the challenge, Joanne. I think when you're looking at insulating coal storage, for example, the buildings that are around now will be around in 2050. Some of them are already quite old. In terms of your products and services and how you're approaching your customers, how are those changing to support customers on their sustainability journey?
Yeah, I think there's a much greater emphasis on efficiency and not just reducing costs, but also reducing carbon and things like that. Talking about the refrigerants, picking up on the question there, I think having your pipework properly treated and thermally insulated, again, is really important to keeping the health and safety standards up in that regard. Something we're working on as under our banner of PLG Insulations is trying to get more information out there about how important it is to have good thermally insulated pipework, because it can cause a lot of issues in terms of if you get condensation on the pipe, particularly in a freezer environment, and that's dripping onto the cold store panels and getting ice build up in the panels there. It does cause a lot of issues, not just thermally efficient and in terms of energy efficiency, but in terms of health and safety as well. So I think we're really trying to kind of approach it from a really holistic point of view, and actually we're finding that a lot of gains in reducing carbon emissions cause other gains that you want anyway, whether it's health and safety or financially.
So it's less about, I guess, new innovation and product development and more about just improving the standards of what's already out there.
Exactly. Building a brand new cold store that's really airtight and thermally efficient is great, but as you said, a lot of the cold stores around today will be here in 2050, and maintaining those, upgrading those for the long term is really important.
Absolutely. Just a quick check if anybody's got any further questions. Shane?
Hi, my name is Martin. I'm from Portico Shipping in Portsmouth. It's a question for Will, specifically. So we would love to be able to have battery storage on our site, but I can't find a funding source for it, and we can't source the capex for it internally. So we're currently exporting most of our energy, and I saw a stand, I'm not sure if it was your stand or someone else's, and it said something like 4 to 6p for the buyback of the exported energy.
Yeah.
So my question is, where do you see that going? Is it going to match the energy that we're buying back? Because my problem is that we're exporting all of this energy, we're getting 6 or 7p, and then when I need it back, I've got to buy it back for 42p. And so when I'm trying to introduce new solar panel systems to my directors, they're asking me what the return of investment is, and when I put it into a graph, it looks terrible, and they can't see the sense in it.
Ironically, I would agree with this idea that it looks terrible. I think from our perspective, in the rooftop market, the capital investment required to make the numbers add up, we're not there yet. And I think the position we take is that the market is developing. A lot of the technology is being adopted at grid scale. There that the numbers in the commercial components do add up, and it makes work. It's a worthwhile proposition. But I think we have a significant road to travel to match, the storage and release of that energy at the appropriate commercial level. I sympathise with you, because as much as I sit here saying, it's all about storage in the future, at our level, in terms of pulling power off the roof and it being released at a certain point in time, there is a road to travel. But I think we are working very closely with our counterparts at Octopus to try and understand that intricately, and we'd like to be at the pointy end of that discussion as and when. But look, I'm very happy to talk about that in more detail after the session, because I think it's a very say again.
I've got a new system to put in, new solar panel system.
You're talking my language now. I like that. That's good.
Again, I can see lots of solar people in the room twitching.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, actually. I think we could sit here for the rest of the morning and talk about this stuff. But I wanted to finish about just asking you about your own company's approach to sustainability, because obviously we're talking mostly today about how operators of cold chain are changing and how you're supporting them. But obviously, I know it's important for each of you to show that kind of leadership within your own businesses as well. We'll start with you, Joanne, about how you as a company are approaching your own carbon footprint.
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge for us has probably been education and knowledge. It's quite common to sort of ask some of our clients, what do you need us to reduce carbon on this project? And they say, well, yeah, but we don't really know how. And I think there's still a lot of learning to be done around exactly how this sort of works. But it's something that we have brought on board a sustainability consultant to help lend us that knowledge. And we're really trying to communicate internally to bring everyone along the journey with us. And part of how we've decided to do that this year is we're actually going to be releasing a series of 3 reports. The first one is launched today here. It's the first place it's been seen, which is about the thermal efficiency of pipework. And later in the year, we'll have 2 more topics of air tightness and thermal efficiency and openings and the operations of a cold store. So we're really trying to focus on the kind of education and the communication piece to bring everyone along. Because I think a real key to solving all these issues that the professor talked about as well is through collaboration and true collaboration, not just sort of saying, oh yeah, let's have a chat, but actually how do we work together to really solve this big problem that we've got.
Brilliant. And you've got copies of that report?
Yes,
No?
we have, yeah, on our stand, yeah, if anyone's interested.
Similar question to you, Lisa. I know I've had discussions with Alan and yourself about you're looking at things like accreditations and how you as a business can
Similar to
show that leadership.
Joanne, we're taking we've got a 3-stage plan, and in its infancy at the moment, or with what we looked at is our own carbon emissions and how we could reduce that with immediate effect. So, introduction of electric cars, vans for our engineers, and so on, charging points in the office and things like that. So we've looked at our own offering and then looked at more outwards towards our products and so on. So the software element and allowing us to reduce energy consumption and CO2 within the plants that we offer and so on, it is in its infancy at the moment. But as I said, trials and everything else is happening at to allow us to move into stage 2 and then eventually stage 3, where we will be on the road to net zero.
Brilliant. And Will, I guess with kind of solar panels, some questions around the sort of reuse of them and recycling and things like that. To you as a company, how do you approach kind of removing old panels and reusing them and things like that?
That's a great question.
Sorry, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that.
Look, there are a variety of ways of recycling the panels. I won't go into detail now, but that's absolutely a focus for us. I think for us as a business, it's more important actually that our individual employees take more responsibility for the way they behave, the way they interact with customers, and ironically, the way in which we deploy. So a lot of the assets that we build all over the country, all over Europe, we like to deploy local capability, local people, and that really talks this idea that we can use technology, but also this idea that people operate well within the locality, and that they're not traveling around as much. They're more actively conscious of what we are trying to deliver and the impact they have as individuals, and the way they are perceived by the customer and the behaviours that they demonstrate. So I think one of the key ones for us is, and a lot of the organisations we talk to, is actually employees are joining organisations that can demonstrate strong CSR credentials. So I think that's what I'm talking about there, is a reflection on their own requirements to be responsible businesses. Yeah. And as people join think about the career they want to take on, I think that's a really important.
And increasingly customers as well are wanting to do business with companies that
exactly
are taking sustainability seriously.
Yeah. It's a good point. Like with obviously with COVID and people starting to work from homes, we made a conscious decision to continue the hybrid working, to reduce travel.
Yeah.
It works. So it was, if we can contribute that way as well and be more socially responsible, then obviously that's another offering that we have. So.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think unless there's any further questions, as I said, I'd love to stay here and carry on talking to you, but we must leave it there and move on. But I really encourage everyone to seek out these 3 guys and the stand and colleagues in the other room and continue the conversation in the networking break. But we'll leave it there for now. Will, Joanne, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.